Are vocals a bit of a struggle for you? No matter what you try, they come through sounding harsh and unpleasant. First off, you're not alone. Vocals are notoriously tricky. Every successful music producer goes through exactly what you're feeling. You're on the right track. Today, I'm going to help you take a big step forward by showing you how to say goodbye to harsh vocals forever. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to smooth out those harsh, annoying vocals. So you've got harsh vocals. There's something going on in the upper mids and the highs that makes you wince when you listen to the vocal. Maybe it's just certain words and phrases, certain sounds, but it hurts to listen to, especially on earbuds or in your car. And when you try to fix it in the mix, it ends up going from being too harsh to too muddy, back to harsh, back to muddy. My kingdom for some middle ground, right? Now, the problem could be the recording. If the recording with nothing on it sounds really harsh, then that might be a good place to start. Maybe try a different mic position, move it closer to the source. A different microphone entirely could be the case. But more than likely, it's not a recording problem, it's a mix problem. And that's good news because it means you don't have to go re-record your vocals again. And today I'm going to share 3 solutions to the three of the most common problems that cause harshness in your vocals. So relax. By the end of this video, you're going to be good to go. If you've watched many of my videos, this one might come as a shock to you, but one of the causes of a harsh vocal is subtractive EQ. What? So if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, here's a vocal, and typically my approach to mixing is instead of doing a lot of boosting of the frequencies I like, I'd rather cut the frequencies that aren't working. I view it like a sculpture. I'm chipping away the things that don't belong and then leaving the things that do. In some ways, it's mostly semantics because if I cut the lows, then it's kind of the same as boosting the highs, but I like the subtractive approach. However, with every approach, there's a good side and a bad side, and the bad side to subtractive EQ is if you cut too much of the lows, if you're too freaked out about having a muddy sounding vocal, then you don't leave enough of the warm frequencies to counteract the bright frequencies. So here is a vocal from my band's latest release, All Again.
Buried and raised again, this new life is stifled by regrets.
So it's a pretty full range vocal, and the first thing I noticed is there's a good bit of warmth there. What mic did I use? This beautiful microphone from Roswell Pro Audio, the K87. Link in the description. This is a fantastic microphone. I love Matt and the folks at Roswell. They're great people. If you're going to buy a microphone this year, let it be this one or one of their K series. They've got a K47 and a K67. They're modeled after vintage, awesome microphones, but they come without the vintage price tag. Check out the link in the description. Go check these out. But this gives it gives me goosebumps when I think about it. There's something about a good mic that just gives me goosebumps. But it gives a nice full sound. It's nice and bright, but it's also got a nice low end to it. And that's the problem a lot of times with vocals. You fall in love with that warmth that's there.
Buried and raised again.
It's cool. Like if I'm like gonna do an overdub voiceover for a movie trailer, I want all that in a world gone mad. I want that big beefiness, but not in a vocal sung in a regular old mix. We don't want all that. So we come in with EQ and we use tools like a low cut to get rid of some of the really deep low end stuff.
Buried and raised again.
And then we probably use like a low shelf to come in and just kind of take care of the rest of the low end below, say, 200.
Buried and raised again. This new life is stifled by regret.
So that already sounds a lot brighter. And if you go, this is borderline too far already. But if you said, I refuse to ever have a muddy vocal again, maybe your first problem with vocals was they were too muddy. That was my case. Everything I mixed was too muddy. And then I overcorrected and went to where everything I mixed wasn't muddy. It was like incredibly bright. And then I found the happy medium in between. But for the vocal, if you continue cutting this, it can be really, really bright.
Buried and raised again. This new life is stifled by regret.
And so you just keep cutting and cutting. And then this is going to make it a lot quieter. So you increase the gain a little bit to make up for some of the volume that you lost. And the net result is
buried and raised again. This new life is stifled by regret.
It's got some some harshness, especially that the louder section, This New Life, that's got more kind of energy to it. Those start coming through and being really annoying. So this is an exaggerated example, but if you find yourself continually pulling more low end out of the vocal, you may want to check yourself, because you might be causing it to be more bright than it needs to be, because there's not that low end to balance it out. This is without compression. Compression will just emphasize whatever you've done with EQ. So here's what I would do instead. Something simple like this.
Buried and raised again. This new life is stifled by regret. Buried and raised again. This new life is stifled by regret.
That feels a good bit better. It's just tamed a little bit of that low end. There's still some brightness there to deal with, but as we deal with that brightness, we're not going to lose some warmth that we want. Not too much warmth, but enough. So let me finish EQing this vocal a little bit here. I think there's a little kind of a hollow mid-range here I want to take out.
Buried and raised again. This new life is stifled by regret.
And now let's go ahead and put a compressor on here. Now, this is where things can go awry. It already sounds a little bit bright in that top end, especially on the S's. And when I go and add compression, like I would do on just about every vocal I mix, that's where things can get a little wonky. We'll go pretty quick on the attack. 5 and 15 or so, attack and release. Let's go 4-to-1 ratio. Let's pull the threshold down. Let's just get it nice and squished.
Buried and raised again. This new life is stifled by regret.
And as we use the makeup gain to make up for the volume we lost with the compression, let's see what that sounds like.
Buried and raised again. This new life is stifled by regrets.
It's not too bad. Let's go a little more aggressive. That's about as much as I would want to do. Let's go a little more aggressive just for demonstration purposes.
Buried and raised again. This new life is stifled by regrets.
So that feels okay, but you'll notice this section here with all the S's, we've encountered our second big problem that causes vocals to sound harsh. That's the sibilance. Sibilance is when S's, T's, sometimes like a TH sound, SH sound, sh, s, ts, all those high frequency energy sounds get emphasized by compression and become super annoying.
This new life is stifled by regret.
It's like cutting through. And if you adjust the attack, it can actually emphasize them even more.
This new life is stifled by regret.
So here's a little side tip. I didn't even mean to show this to you in this video. Adjusting this attack setting will kind of adjust how much of those sibilant sounds come through. If we go super slow on this attack, you'll hear the sibilants come through more.
This new life is stifled.
And if we go faster on the attack, you'll hear those S's, they get kind of looped in with everything else and squished down.
This new life is stifled by
pretty cool. Now, you have to everything is a compromise in mixing. So maybe you don't like, when you go faster with the attack, everything sounds more aggressive. So maybe you want a little less attack, but you don't want to go all the way out to here. So somewhere in like maybe the 20 millisecond feels right for this song, 13 milliseconds.
This new life is stifled by regret.
It's aggressive without being overly compressed, but the byproduct of this is that sibilance coming through. What's the answer? Of course, the answer is a de-esser. Your DAW probably has one. If not, it's worth buying one. Studio One has a de-esser. All it does is listen to the high frequencies and turn them down when they get naughty. That's it. So it's listening to this. And you can adjust the frequency that it's listening to. Usually 6 to 7K is a good place to start. Sometimes a little bit lower.
This new life is stifled by regret. This new life is stifled by this new life is stifled by.
This vocal, the S seems to kind of sit around maybe 7K or so. And then we just use this S reduction knob to say how much of that are you going to turn down. Now, I'm going to demonstrate what a lot of people do and get wrong here when using a de-esser.
This new life is stifled by regret. This new life is stifled by regret. This new life is stifled.
They think in terms of, I'm afraid of over-compressing. And so they'll do it until they see just a little bit of gain reduction happening and they'll move on. The problem is it may not have done really anything. Remember, it's only turning down those high frequencies. So to my ear, this hasn't really done much. So you say, but Joe, I put a de-esser on there. And I'd say, but you didn't turn it down enough, so it's not actually doing much. Here's what I would do. Turn the de-esser down until it sounds like the singer has a lisp, where the S's turn into th. Instead of it goes th. Then work your way back up and find a spot where the S's are appropriate and not too quiet and not too loud. Let's try that.
This new life is stifled by regret. This new life is stifled by regret.
Now that's too much. Don't worry about what you see here on the gain reduction meter. That's mostly useless on a de-esser because sometimes 12 dB of gain reduction on the sibilance is exactly what it needs. Go by your ear. If it helps to move it where you can't see it anymore, or close your eyes and just move the knob, that's worth doing. Let's do that. Let's leave it off the screen so we can't see it, and let's adjust this a little bit. So we're down too far to where the S's kind of disappeared.
This new life is stifled by regret.
That's too much de-essing, just so we're clear. It sounds like I have a lisp. Now, let's turn it back up until we find a spot where those S's come in and they're just sitting right on top of the vocal. Not way loud, just sitting on top of it.
This new life is stifled by regret. This new life is stifled by. This new life is stifled by regret.
That feels pretty good to me. At minus 18, that feels pretty good. If we go all the way up to where there's nothing,
this new life is stifled by.
Those S's are like a little too much. So we pull them down a little bit.
This new life is stifled by regret.
And we can see here's what's happening.
This new life is stifled by regret.
And then if you find you're not getting, it's working hard, but it's not quite getting all the frequencies, you can lower this a little bit. So it's responding around maybe more like 5 or 6K.
This new life is stifled by regret.
That feels pretty good to me. This one's more subtle. It depending on your voice and how things are working. Sometimes those S's, and depending on the song, sometimes the S's after you compress are just out of control. Combination, mess with the attack. Try a faster attack on the compressor, even if it means raising the threshold so it's not compressing as much. Maybe that will help grab some of those S's, and then put a de-esser after the compressor to tame the rest. Now, some people will say, what about putting it before? It's fine. If the S's are a noticeable problem before you even added compression, it might make sense to put them before. I've done it both ways. I don't really have a preference. I tend to do it after because I tend to not notice the sibilance, I'd say 8 times out of 10 until I've added compression. So then I'll just add the de-esser right after that. But there's no right or wrong there. You can try it in both positions, but get in the habit of making this a part of your workflow because sibilance is one of the biggest reasons why vocals sound harsh. All right, here's the third place where you can really smooth out a vocal, and it's one of my favorites. This would be one of those things if I was the kind of audio guy who wanted to keep something to himself and not share it with the world, because it's mine, like my precious. This would be one of those that I would not share, but I'm sharing it with you. This is the idea of and if you've taken my mastering course specifically, you'll know, there is a devil frequency in audio, and it sits around 2.6K. And it's this ringing that happens on lots of different things, especially loud vocals and electric guitars. When things get nice and kind of overdriven, that's where a lot of the energy of a song happens. And we don't want to get rid of those frequencies entirely, but there's this ringing that can happen up in those frequencies. I've got a perfect example. Here's the same song. And this is in the chorus. I'm singing at the top of my range as loud as I can. Arguably, it's too high for me, but it is what it is. But specifically, this note right here, I'm singing the word I would in a high register for me, and there's this ringing that comes out. See if you can hear it. It's on this word right here.
If I had to do it again, I would.
Did you hear it? Now, I don't like this vocal by itself. I put slapback delay on it. It feels a lot better, but for demonstration, I want you to hear it just like this. Listen again.
I would.
There's a whistle happening at right around there. Right there. Listen. And what happens in the mix, for whatever reason, that range of frequencies, like the upper mids, 1 to 3K or so, our ears are very sensitive to that. I think that's because it's the frequency of a twig snapping off behind us before the tiger attacks and kills us. So it's essential to survival, but it can be super annoying in a mix, especially a louder mix with aggressive sounds. So what do? Let's grab another EQ. I'm going to put this at the end of the chain just so we can demonstrate it here. The ringing, if I had to guess, You may have noticed my high-mid frequency on my EQ defaults to 2.6K. Let's just boost that and see if that's it. It's not quite the right frequency. I'm going to turn it down so as not to annoy you, but let's find it real quick. Right there. Now, it seems to be maybe an octave of the note I'm singing, but I've noticed, having done this hundreds of times, there's a certain frequency that just seems to be a resonant frequency of the vocalist, or whatever the thing is that you're recording. Maybe it's the resonant frequency of like nasal passages, but when it gets nasally and the sound, something happens, and that gets real crazy. So the solution here is something called a notch filter. A notch filter looks like this. It's basically an EQ where you crank up the Q control, which is the width control for the EQ, and then you turn it down. You're essentially dialing in a very specific frequency and trying to only turn that frequency down. So I'm going to real quickly demonstrate that we found the right frequency by sweeping this up and down, and we'll find the one that really stands out, and then we'll pull it down.
Walk the same road.
Right there, around 2.8 this time. Sometimes it's around 2.6 and it varies from song to song, vocal to vocal, but that feels like the one. So now I'm going to pull this down. How far you pull it down, I like to go aggressive because typically it's so narrow, there's not much else happening in this frequency range that I want. I'm just pulling this down to balance out that ringing that's happening. So let's just be aggressive and pull it all the way down. People will say, oh, that's too much. I don't care. See what it sounds like first. And let's listen to the vocal now.
Walk the same road, and in the end, I did again.
I mean, let's listen before and after. Here's without.
Did again.
And now with.
Did again.
You hear that? If you mute it, if you bypass it while the vocal is singing, it literally sounds like a truck backing up. Now, when I turn it off, see if you can hear the vocal without hearing that thing happening.
Again,
I don't know why it happens, but it does. And you might say, oh, Joe, it's your room. Probably not, because I've been in like 8 or 9 different studios over the last decade, and it's been present in all of them. And I've used different microphones, different positions, different everything, and it's still there. So I think it's a naturally occurring phenomenon.
again,
So what ends up happening? What's the result of this? You may say, what's the point? The point is, inside a dense mix, that vocal will be sitting just wonderfully, and then he or she will sing a note, and it'll feel like, oh, I got to turn it down. 9 times out of 10, it's not a need to turn it down thing. There's an upper mid frequency that became annoying for that section of the song. So a notch like this will solve that problem. And you may say, but Joe, it's going to be notching that on every part of the vocal. That's fine with me.
if I had
That sounds fine. If I go back to like a quieter vocal part.
buried and raised again, this new life is stifled by regret.
It probably helped that note right there. Let's see. Yep, there was a little whistling there too. So I'm okay with it being present throughout. There is the option of using what's called dynamic EQ, where you have the same frequency. It's essentially the same notch, but it only notches when that frequency gets loud. That's a valid approach as well. But if you find one that's just pretty consistent from a vocal from start to finish, I got no problems with using a notch like this. And if -20 makes you break out in hives, go with something less, but do what works. Same with that de-esser from before. If you do a little bit because that just feels right, but it doesn't sound right, then it's wrong. So go ahead and be aggressive when it needs aggressiveness. Not always, but when it needs it, and you'll find yourself with nice, smooth vocals that sit on top of the mix without jumping out and being obnoxiously bright and harsh. By the way, do you need a place to practice this kind of stuff? Come try out my VIP Gold membership, and you'll get access to a whole library of songs to mix, along with video walkthroughs of how I mix them. So you can practice your mixing skills, practice this whistling thing, and then get training from me via the walkthrough videos whenever you get stuck. There are even ways for you to get feedback from me on your mix inside the membership. Come take VIP for a free test drive over at homestudiocorner.com/VIP. Okay, so to review, don't cut too much lows and low mids on your vocal if you don't want them to be too harsh. Use a de-esser and use it aggressively when needed, and take advantage of a notch filter to take care of those annoying ringing frequencies in the upper mid-range. Those are my 3 tricks for getting vocals to sound smooth every time. Try it on your next mix. Oh, and if you haven't seen this video on how to make your vocals sound professional, I'd definitely check that out next. Thanks for watching. See ya.